Good evening, Namaskar. Friends, today we are in the midst of a serious set of environmental challenges. And if you look at the newspaper headlines, you have an oil well blowing out in Assam, causing death and destruction. You have a polymer plant blowing up in Vaishakhapatnam, causing death and destruction. You have landslides in Kodagu, in my home state, which has again resulted in the loss of the loss of lives. And across the world, there is tremendous concern that we are in the midst of a pandemic that has actually been triggered by messing with nature. In this larger context, when the whole world is concerned, when we should be absolutely concerned about how we respect the world of nature and the power that it entails and that it has in terms of affecting our lives and livelihoods and that of the natural world as well, at a time when India is supposed to be leading the Solar Alliance and taking a leading role in terms of climate change negotiations, etc. At a time like that, when we're not in a position to engage with public protest, engage with the government in various activities and interactions, we suddenly find that the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change is going ahead with its draft environmental impact notification 2020. This is par for the course as far as the Modi government is concerned. Over the last few years, across the board, whether it has to do with forest rights, whether it has to do with other dimensions, air pollution that we all experience when we live in Delhi, every dimension related to environmental protection, we find that the government says it would rather focus on the ease of doing business, and it has gone ahead and weakened protections across the board. We see wildlife dying. We see lots and lots of tragedies, man-made tragedies across the board. And in this context, we have a draft environment impact notification that is out, and it has, it has really horrified anyone who is concerned about environmental protection in India. And to understand more about what this is about and why we should be really agitated and why we should then take action in terms of giving our inputs and conveying our objections to the government, we actually have a very interesting discussion lined up today. And right up front, let me introduce you to our main speaker for today. That is Shri Jairam Ramesh. Shri Jairam Ramesh is a member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha. And he used to be, during the UPA years, Minister for Environment and Forests, independent charge, if I recall. Anyway, but basically, during his time in that ministry, Jairam Ramesh ji actually set new records, you might say, for openness and transparency and public engagement. I certainly remember discussions that were and consultations that took place around the country on whether or not to allow BT Brinjal to be introduced. So that's the kind of spirit with which Jairam Ramesh ji approached the whole idea of public consultation, environmental issues, etc. And what we see from Shri Prakash Javadekar today is the opposite of whatever Jairam Ramesh ji had chosen to do when he was in charge. And Jairam Ramesh ji in the last few days has been leading the effort publicly to get the government to pay attention to these concerns. And so I am going to invite him to speak to us today. And let me just start by asking him upfront, what are his major objections? What is wrong with the draft environment impact assessment notification 2020? And if you could, Jairam ji, welcome to this evening's program. And if you could lay out the highlights of the main problems that you see with this draft EIA notification.
Well, the last time we had an environmental impact assessment notification was 2006. And 14 years later, a new draft EIA notification is out for public consultations. In itself, having an EIA notification modified or amended or changed is not unwelcome because new challenges arise. We learn from experience. We have court orders, and generally, I think it's a good idea to keep revising, reviewing, relooking policy once in every 5 years. So, per se, I have no problem with any government revisiting previous notifications. However, uh, there are serious problems with the current notification. First of all, we know that we are in the midst of a profound crisis. This is a public health crisis, but fundamentally, it's an environmental crisis. It's a crisis driven by a change in the equilibrium between man and nature. But let me not get into the philosophical aspects of today's crisis and focus on the question that you have asked. What is the problem with the current draft EIA notification? Now, many organizations across the country have sent representations to the ministry expressing their objections. Different people have different points of view. For example, this morning I got a whole set of representations from the Northeast. And very many organizations across the Northeast objecting to the notification on grounds that it is simply insensitive to the needs and challenges of the Northeast. So different people have different points of view. But let's pick out what are the most serious and what are the most potentially disastrous aspects of the notification. Number one, what it does is it reduces the role of public hearings. Now, good, bad, or imperfect, public hearings are an essential aspect of environmental impact assessment. Now, that role has been curtailed very dramatically. Second, what this notification does is opens the window for ex post facto approval, which means you can start a project and then you can realize that you've not got the environmental clearance, and then the environmental clearance is given to you. So this ex post facto approval really makes a mockery of the environmental impact assessment process. Thirdly, there are a large number of projects which have been exempt from environmental impact assessment altogether. This itself is cause for grave concern. Fourth, I would say that what the notification does is open the window. Say you have an alumina refinery of 1 million tons. You get an environmental clearance for that. And then you want to expand, for the expansion, for a large number of these expansion projects, you don't require environmental approval. That's, I think, again, something that, we really need to be concerned about. And finally, uh, there is a whole set of areas. You get environmental approval for a certain period. You have acquired the land. Now you sit on the land. You sit on the environmental approval with no intention of starting the project whatsoever. It becomes a sort of a land grab project. So, I think these are the fundamental objections in my view. The role of public hearings, the ex post facto approvals, the fact that you're increasing the validity for environmental approvals, the fact that you're exempting a whole slew of projects from environmental impact assessment. And then you're centralizing, you're talking of cooperative federalism, and on the other hand, you are now empowering the central government basically to set up state environmental impact assessment authorities. So you're really snatching away the powers of the state governments. Whereas, while the laws are federal laws. These are central laws. The implementation and enforcement are ultimately at the state level. The states are equal partners in the monitoring of environmental regulations. And in fact, I would argue that in view of what has happened in the last couple of months, we need to look at the third layer, which has been absent in this debate on environment, which is the urban local bodies, the 74th Amendment. That acquires new relevance for environmental management. Cities, for example, have to be more empowered to manage problems related to their environment. So I think these are the issues that are agitating a lot of people across the country. And I hope that the government listens to it. But Rajiv, more than the draft EIA notification, I think the fundamental guiding principle has been the ease of doing business. Yesterday, we had the standing committee meeting, and the main reason given for the draft EIA notification was the ease of doing business. So, what does this show? This shows that the government believes that environmental regulation is a burden, is a speed breaker, and you need to do away with it. I think this is a very dangerous idea. That the notion that environmental laws are speed breakers, they are burdens, and they are not societal obligations. I think, this mindset is a very dangerous mindset. So, these are the concerns that people have. I hope that I have very little, hopes that they will actually do anything about it. But I think the democratic process should be. And I'm hoping that when Parliament reconvenes, we would take this up for discussion. As it is, we had the first meeting of the standing committee yesterday, and I can tell you there was a determined effort by all BJP members in the committee to stall a discussion. I was taken aback. I was absolutely dumbfounded that the 6 members of Parliament actually said, "What is the point discussing this notification?" But I heard them out patiently, and exercised my right as the chairman of the standing committee to have a discussion. In fact, the whole idea yesterday was to get a better understanding of why the government is coming out with this notification. And I found it extraordinary that the BJP MPs collectively, obviously, this was a command performance. Obviously, they'd been told to raise these objections. But it shows the mindset, and I think that's what is very, very worrying. So let me not, continue further. I mean, we should make this more of an interactive session.
For those who've just joined us, let me welcome you all once more to an interaction with Sri Jairam Ramesh on the draft Environment Impact Assessment Notification 2020. This is the online version of the Current Issues Forum of the All India Congress Committee's research department. And basically, what Jairam Ramesh has just told us is that the ease of doing business has become the top priority, and environmental concerns are being seen as something that. Now, Jairamji, you have had a lot of experience with public consultations. And here, if you look at the draft, it actually freezes the public out, even where where assessment is going to take place. You see that only the project proponent or the government can report something going wrong. And so where does that leave civil society? Where does that leave? You talked about urban local bodies, about the kind of expertise that's needed to monitor and ensure that the environment is actually protected. In our city, the city that I live in, Bengaluru, we've had cases of lakes catching fire. Right, that's the kind of example. That's an example of how bad things are. But at a time like that, there is tremendous capacity among citizen activists and groups and NGOs, academics and scientists who could all play an active role. And the current draft basically freezes them all out of this process. How would you improve? How would you improve this process?
It's not a surprise because for the last 6 years, there has been a systematic attempt to muzzle the voice of civil society. And the very civil society organizations that made my life miserable at the time when I was minister have been eloquent by their silence. I don't blame them because they have been silenced. They have been bludgeoned into silence. And the draft EIA notification, you've rightly pointed out, objections can be raised only by government bodies and government organizations. This is extraordinary. In fact, some of the glaring violations of the conditions of environmental approval have been highlighted by local communities who have been affected by these projects, whether it's coal mining, whether it's irrigation projects, whether it is hydro projects, or whether it's power plants. But you see, you go back and look at the track record. You're loosening pollution standards in thermal power plants. You're diluting coastal regulation zone, the regulations that govern the development of coastal areas. You're opening up the Western Ghats in a very substantial manner, an eco-sensitive area. So you look at this whole track record. The track record is one of global rhetoric. Globally, you want to assume the level, the role of being an environmental leader, but domestically, what you're doing is systematically diluting all the laws that we have. Whether it's the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, whether it's the Environmental Protection Act of 1986, whether it's the Forest Rights Act of 2006, there's been a systematic attempt at diluting it and making sure that these are changed in a manner that helps businesses. As you said, it's the ease of doing business is of paramount importance. And my greatest worry, Rajiv, is that in our desire for faster economic recovery from this current crisis, land laws and environmental laws will become the biggest casualty. Government will argue that, let's have regulatory forbearance, to use a phrase that you are familiar with. Let's have regulatory forbearance. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as forbearance. It becomes permanent. And this is what I think, people are genuinely worried. I think the media should raise these questions. Civil society certainly should raise these questions. It's not easy when you have a government that is not prepared to listen, but I think we just have to persist. There is no other alternative.
See, one of the arguments that the government comes up with is about strategic projects, that there are large numbers of projects that are strategic in nature, vital to India's economic and other security concerns. And they've made a number of projects and domains come under this definition of strategic. I'm sure you would agree that some strategic projects need to be given some kind of exemption. What would you consider strategic? What as qualifying for that categorization?
No strategic project has ever suffered because of environmental approvals. It may have taken a little more time, and rightly so. But there can be no argument that projects, for example, on the border, for building border infrastructure, need to be put on a fast track. But this is a red herring. Let's keep the strategic aspects aside. By the way, people in the Northeast have been arguing that by this broad definition, any project in the Northeast will become a strategic project. And a large number of organizations in the Northeast have actually raised this question. So I am sympathetic, frankly, to the idea that we need to build in a faster manner infrastructure in the border areas. And certainly, a way can be found. But that's not an argument for diluting the entire edifice of environmental regulation. which is what the draft EIA notification is. I mean, there have been numerous articles on this by serious scholars, by sober people, not necessarily by activists, by serious academics, serious lawyers. I think people who have worked on environmental issues. So I think, people should listen. And this is the time, extraordinary time. In fact, the government is about to push through these notifications during the time of the crisis. They shortened the time for public consultations because of public pressure. They extended the time till the 11th of August. Then the standing committee, as I said, started meeting. We met on the 7th. So, I mean, these are processes that we have to go through. And I hope that the draft EIA notification is kept in abeyance. As I said, it's one thing updating previous notifications. It's one thing systematizing previous notifications. But if you're changing the very architecture of the notification, I think that's very dangerous and disturbing.
So that brings up the role of Parliament. See, ultimately, the people who objected.
Let me also say one other thing, Rajiv. I should mention, the way, for example, the government has completely emasculated the National Green Tribunal. The National Green Tribunal was set up in 2010 through an act of Parliament to democratize decision making in environmental matters, to give the public a stake. And I know for a fact that many BJP MPs have come to me privately and said that the NGT is the best thing that could have happened for environmental decision making. And many MPs from Karnataka, I shan't name these MPs, you know whom I'm referring to, said that had it not been for the NGT, many environmentally disastrous projects in the city of Bengaluru, would have seen the light of day. Look at what the government has done to the NGT. It's systematically, with order after order, through the Finance Act, as a money bill, they've brought about fundamental changes in the way the NGT functions. So these are this notification is only the tip of the iceberg. It's part of a series of decisions that have been taken over the last couple of years, and it's a two-legged thing. Become an environmental champion globally, but domestically use the ease of doing business argument to loosen, dilute, emasculate all environmental laws and institutions. And this should actually be unacceptable to us.
Absolutely. And one of the points I want to raise is about the role of Parliament. Your MPs who objected to even bringing this up in the standing committee are probably saying, hey, this is a policy that's under the ministry and Parliament has nothing to do with it. That can't be true because this is all subordinate legislation under the original Environmental Protection Act, and therefore Parliament would have a role. Similarly, when you think about the kinds of assurances that have been made by ministers on different bills that they brought before the House, they've always promised that they would protect the environment when we raise those issues. And here, I'll give you one instance. I spoke when I was your colleague in the Rajya Sabha on the waterways bill. And Mr. Gadkari pointed out that, yes, of course, we'll take environment into account and we'll make sure that ecosystems are not affected. I had specifically spoken about the Ganga. I had spoken about the Gangetic dolphin. I had spoken about a Gadial sanctuary, about a turtle sanctuary. And basically, if I recall, I think the minister was just looking at me blankly saying, why are you wasting my time? But the basic point is that I think there is a tremendous role for Parliament in keeping all this, or at least hauling up the government on these fronts, whether now that they have essentially the numbers in both houses, whether we'll be able to do anything more than that. I think I'll just leave this thought with you. Do you want to respond, or should I move on to asking others to come in?
But, Rajiv, assurances are made in Parliament and they are broken routinely. In 2016, Mr. Arun Jaitley and the then Environment Minister Anil Madhav Dave made repeated assurances in Parliament that the Campa funds, the compensatory afforestation, plantation money funds, would be used only with the approval and the consent of the Gram Sabha. And this was the point that some of us made, that you're completely bypassing the Gram Sabha, you're bypassing the Forest Rights Act, you're bypassing PESA, and assurances were given to us that when the rules are going to be formulated, this would be taken into account. But actually, the reality is that they have not been taken into account. The Forest Rights Act, which is a historic piece of legislation, which protects the rights of not only tribals but also traditional forest dwellers, has been completely weakened from the point of view of environmental approvals. I'll give you one example. In April 2011, the Menda Leka village in Gadchiroli district became the first Gram Sabha to control trade in bamboo. And I remember when I had been to Menda Leka, the Chief Minister of Maharashtra was with me. The local leader, the tribal leader, Devaji Tofa, got up and he said, Delhi, Mumbai mein hamari sarkar, Menda Leka mein hum hi sarkar. And it is in that spirit that we transferred the rights of bamboo trade to the Gram Sabha. Now that has been completely reversed by the erstwhile government in Maharashtra. It's gone back to the Forest Department. So I think this is a government that can quote Sanskrit shlokas very frequently to show that it is committed to the protection of the environment. But it's not the talk that counts, it's the walk that counts. There's very little to object to the talk. पर्यावरण और विकास के बीच में संतुलन होना चाहिए, इससे कौन लड़ सकता है? सब लोग जानते हैं कि पर्यावरण और विकास के बीच में संतुलन होना जरूरी है, पर वो कैसे संतुलन लाया जाए? और ये संतुलन में जो कभी-कभी वाद विवाद खड़ा हो जाता है, कभी-कभी आपको ये चुनना पड़ता है, विकास चुनना पड़ता है या पर्यावरण संरक्षण चुनना पड़ता है, उसकी बात तो नहीं होती है. So I think walking the talk is more important than simply saying we are committed to environmental protection, which is the routine slogan that is used by those in power today. I can't hear you, Rajiv.
शुक्रिया जयराम जी. हम अभी हिंदी में भी थोड़ा सा डिस्कशन करेंगे, और मैं बिहार में हमारा रिसर्च डिपार्टमेंट के चेयरमैन श्री आनंद माधव को चलूंगा. पर उसके पहले लोग पूछ रहे हैं क्या कर सकते हैं हम, what can we do about registering our protest. So I'm just going to flash on the screen what action people can take if they want to convey their objections to the government. And let's just show the screen. Yeah. So how can you register your objections? You can send an email to EIA2020-MOEFCC@gov.in, or write to the Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Indira Paryavaran Bhavan, Dior Bagh Road, Aliganj, New Delhi, 110003. Okay. So let me now turn to Anand Madhavji from Bihar, who will take this discussion forward. Anand Madhavji, आपका प्रश्न.
सर, सबको प्रणाम मेरा, और मैं डॉक्टर जयराम रमेश जी की बात से ही इसकी शुरुआत करना चाहूँगा. जो अभी इन्होंने कहा था, और अपनी पुस्तक जो है इन्होंने इंदिरा गांधी लाइफ इन नेचर में भी इसकी चर्चा आपने बहुत खूब ढंग से की है कि आर्थिक प्रगति और पारिस्थितिकी संतुलन में हमेशा एक चुनौती रहा है. लेकिन इंदिरा जी हमेशा इसके प्रति सचेत रहती थी, अपने सहयोगियों तथा मुख्यमंत्रियों से बराबर इसके बारे में चर्चा और संवाद करते रहती थी. क्या आपको ये नहीं लगता है कि जो अभी वर्तमान ड्राफ्ट है EIA का 2020 का संविदा इन सारे रास्तों को बंद कर देती है और मोदी जी इस तरह के निर्णय लेकर सिर्फ कुछ खास लोगों को प्रभावित करना चाहते हैं। प्रकृति से छेड़छाड़ पूरे मानवता के प्रति कहीं संकट तो नहीं ला देगा?
आनंद जी,
सर।
एक तो पहली बात तो ये मैं बता दूं कि हमारे देश में सिर्फ एक प्रधानमंत्री रही है जिन्होंने पर्यावरण को बहुत गंभीरता से, न वक्तव्य से बल्कि अपने काम से, एक नजरिया है उनका जो रहा है, वो सिर्फ इंदिरा गांधी थी। वो सिर्फ बातें नहीं करती थी पर्यावरण के बारे में। भाषण देना बहुत आसान है, सभी लोग भाषण देते हैं, पर जमीन पर आप क्या कर रहे हैं, आप क्या निर्णय ले रहे हैं? जब चुनौती आती है आपके सामने, जब विकल्प होता है, जब सवाल उठता है क्या एक हाइडल प्रोजेक्ट लगना चाहिए या एक जंगल जमीन को संरक्षण देना चाहिए। मिसाल के तौर से जब साइलेंट वैली जो वेस्टर्न घाट्स में है, केरल के जिले में है, जब ये सवाल उठा था 1980 में कि क्या ये एक विद्युत परियोजना यहाँ बनना चाहिए और विद्युत परियोजना के लागू होने से उसका नतीजा क्या होगा, 1000 एकड़ जंगल जमीन हम खो देंगे। तो इन हालात में उन्होंने ऐसे निर्णय लिए, साहसी निर्णय उन्होंने लिया। और इसीलिए मैं बार बार कहता हूं, बातें कहना बहुत आसान है, पर संतुलन होना जरूरी है, सब लोग जानते हैं। पर संतुलन कैसे लाया जाए, आप कैसे निर्णय लेंगे? वायु प्रदूषण, जल प्रदूषण, रासायनिक संदूषण, जलवायु परिवर्तन, ये सब हकीकत है। और इस हकीकत को मद्देनजर रखते हुए जो अभी 2020 में पर्यावरण प्रभाव आकलन अधिसूचना निकाला गया है, मैं समझता हूं बहुत गंभीर मसला है। इस पर जनता की ओर से सुझाव आने चाहिए, इस पर विचार विमर्श होना चाहिए और हमें इसमें कोई जल्दबाजी नहीं करनी चाहिए।
जी, इसी से जुड़ा प्रश्न है सर, जो आपने भी बात कही उसी को लेकर मैं आगे बढ़ता हूँ कि जल जीवन वायु की गुणवत्ता को अगर नुकसान पहुंचे तो उसकी भरपाई कभी संभव नहीं है। पर्यावरण में गिरावट का कारक बनना एक अपराध है, ये हम सब जानते हैं। लेकिन ये EIA 2020 का संविदा इसकी रक्षा करता नहीं दिख रहा है। पारिस्थितिकी तंत्र, वन्य जीवन और मानव स्वास्थ्य अक्सर अपरिवर्तनीय है। लेकिन अगर EIA संविदा अस्तित्व में आती है तो निस्संदेह ये एक अपरिपक्व निर्णय होगा।
बिल्कुल, इसमें बहुत खामियां हैं, बहुत कई लोगों ने लिखा है, कई लोगों ने अपने सुझाव दिए हैं, पर खामियां बहुत है। खामियां तो मूलभूत खामियां ये है कि जो पब्लिक हियरिंग होता है, जो सामाजिक प्रभाव के पहले, इम्पैक्ट असेसमेंट के पहले जो पब्लिक हियरिंग होता है, उसकी भूमिका को बहुत संक्षिप्त में कर दिया गया है, बिल्कुल काट दिया गया है। और कई ऐसे प्रावधान हैं, बहुत चिंताजनक प्रावधान है। एक प्रावधान ये रखा गया है कि आप एक परियोजना की शुरुआत कर सकते हैं और उसके बाद आपको पर्यावरण अनुमति मिल सकती है। ये क्या तरीका है? विकास का तरीका ये है कि आप शुरू करें परियोजना और एक्स पोस्ट फैक्टो अप्रूवल ले। ये मैंने कभी सुना नहीं है। तो ऐसे बहुत खामियां हैं, बहुत चिंताजनक प्रावधान है। तो इसमें, और जैसा कि मैंने कहा, ऐसे हालात में हम लोग सब जानते हैं कि आज जो हमारे सामने, न केवल भारत के सामने, सारी दुनिया के सामने ये कोविड समस्या है। और कोविड समस्या और पर्यावरण की समस्या दोनों एक ही सिक्के के दो चेहरे। एक बात आपको बता दो आनंद, कई लोग जानते नहीं होंगे, ये इंदिरा पर्यावरण भवन जो अभी अभी राजीव गौड़ा ने जिक्र किया है इसका, जहां पर्यावरण मंत्रालय का ऑफिस है, अगर इंदिरा पर्यावरण भवन आप जाएंगे तो बिल्कुल सामने लिखा है प्रकृति रक्षति रक्षतः।
जी, जी।
प्रकृति रक्षति रक्षतः, इसका माने क्या है? प्रकृति उसी की रक्षा करेगी जो प्रकृति की रक्षा करेंगे।
बिल्कुल सही।
अगर आप प्रकृति को छेड़छाड़ करेंगे तो प्रकृति भी अपनी बदला लेगी। तो अधिनियम, ये अधिसूचना जो है, इसमें जल्दबाजी नहीं होनी चाहिए। राज्यों के साथ विचार विमर्श होना चाहिए, सामाजिक संस्थाओं के साथ, सिविल सोसाइटी संस्थाओं के साथ विचार विमर्श होने के बाद ही ये ड्राफ्ट, ये मसौदा जो है उसको अंतिम रूप देने की जरूरत है। कल हमारी स्टैंडिंग कमेटी की बैठक हुई, आपको हैरान होगा सुनकर कि हमारे बीजेपी के 6 सांसद कहने लगे कि इस मसौदे पर विचार विमर्श करना जरूरी नहीं है। अरे जब मसौदा है तभी तो विचार विमर्श होता है, अंतिम रूप के बाद तो विचार विमर्श नहीं होता है ना। विचार विमर्श तभी होता है जब मसौदा है। आज तो ये मसौदा है और काफी उन्होंने कोशिश की, पर मैं अड़िग रहा और अच्छी बातचीत हुई। मंत्रालय की ओर से स्पष्टीकरण आया कि अधिसूचना क्यों लाया जा रहा, और कई सांसदों ने कहा, कुछ सांसद इसका समर्थन किया, कई सांसदों ने इसका विरोध भी किया। पर ये तो लोकतंत्र है, यही तो लोकतंत्र की खूबी है।
सर इसी से आगे अगर हम बात करते हैं, अपने संविधान की बात करते हैं, तो भारतीय संविधान के अनुच्छेद 51A(g) यह बताता है कि प्रत्येक नागरिक का यह मौलिक कर्तव्य है कि वो वनों, झीलों, नदियों और वन्य जीवन सहित प्राकृतिक पर्यावरण की रक्षा करे एवं जीवों के प्रति दया का भाव दिखाए। लेकिन EIA 2020 संविधान नागरिकों के इस अधिकार का हनन करता है, ये हम आप सब जान रहे हैं। तो हम आपसे ये जानना चाहेंगे कि नागरिकों, सरकार, इस कंपनियों को या बाकी जो नागर समाज है वो कैसे अपने इस मौलिक कर्तव्यों का पालन करे और कैसे उनको प्रोत्साहित किया जा सके।
देखिए, एक बहुत जो बड़ा कदम पार्लियामेंट ने लिया था 2010 में, एक नया कानून जो बना, नेशनल ग्रीन ट्राइब्यूनल कानून, इसी प्रावधान के तहत बना कि पब्लिक पार्टिसिपेशन को और कैसे प्रोत्साहन दिया जाए, इसको और कैसे बढ़ावा दिया जाए, और इस पृष्ठभूमि में नेशनल ग्रीन ट्राइब्यूनल बना। पर पिछले 10 साल का अनुभव देखिए, पहले 3-4 साल तो नेशनल ग्रीन ट्राइब्यूनल चला, पर पिछले 5-6 साल में जिस तरीके से नेशनल ग्रीन ट्राइब्यूनल के टांगे को काटने का जो प्रयास किया गया है, सिर्फ प्रयास नहीं, ये हकीकत भी है, और कि कई ऐसे कदम उठाए गए हैं सरकार की ओर से जो नेशनल ग्रीन ट्राइब्यूनल है, जिसका मकसद है पब्लिक पार्टिसिपेशन, पब्लिक को और करीब लाना पर्यावरण की नीति के से, उसमें बहुत परिवर्तन लाए हैं। तो ये जो अधिसूचना है आनंद, ये अचानक नहीं आया है, ये अचानक नहीं आया है। इसमें कोई आश्चर्य नहीं है कि अधिसूचना आया है, क्योंकि जब बार बार हमारे प्रधानमंत्री बोलते हैं ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस, ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस, ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस, तो ये क्या मंशा है, नजरिया क्या है, दृष्टिकोण क्या है? दृष्टिकोण यही है कि पर्यावरण संबंधित कानून, जमीन अधिग्रहण संबंधित कानून बाधाएं हैं। अगर आप ये सोचकर आगे चले हैं, अगर आप ये सोचते हैं कि कानून बाधाएं हैं, तो आनंद, ये मैं समझता हूं हमारे देश के लिए बहुत बड़ा खतरा है।
सर आपको ये नहीं लगता होगा कि जो इस तरह से भी जो हमारा ये कानून लाने की जो का प्रयास हो रहा है, इसमें इसको प्रचार प्रसार उस ढंग से नहीं मिला, क्योंकि जनता अभी तक, एक तो पहले चोरी चोरी पीछे पीछे लाने का प्रयास इन लोगों ने किया, क्योंकि तब से लॉकडाउन शुरू हो गया था, और इसको अखबारों में, टेलीविजन के माध्यम से और तरह से माध्यम से बहुत प्रचारित प्रसारित नहीं किया गया, जिससे लोग जागरूक हो और इसका जमकर विरोध कर सके।
देखिए, लॉकडाउन के बहाने, लॉकडाउन तो था, और अगर पब्लिक में ये दबाव नहीं बनता तो ये अधिसूचना जो है, जो अभी तक मसौदा है, इसको अंतिम रूप दिया जाता। मुझे खुश है कि 11 अगस्त तक टाइम दिया गया है कि आप कमेंट लाएं, और इसके बाद मंत्री ने मुझे जवाब दिया है, मेरे खत में जवाब में उन्होंने कहा है कि हम विचार करेंगे। तो सुझाव आया है कई संस्थाओं से, तो सुझाव आए हैं, तो चिंताएं प्रकट किए गए हैं, जो आशंकाएं प्रकट किए गए हैं, उस पर हम विचार करेंगे। उन्होंने ये आश्वासन तो दिया है, अगर ये करेंगे कि नहीं वो अलग बात है, पर उन्होंने ये कहा है। मैं समझता हूँ संस्थाओं के द्वारा, व्यक्तियों के द्वारा, विशेषज्ञों के द्वारा ये दबाव बरकरार रहना चाहिए।
हमारी सहयोगी सर मधुबाला भी जुड़ी हैं हमारे साथ। हम चाहेंगे मधुबाला आप भी सर से जो प्रश्न है वो आप करें।
सर को मेरा प्रणाम और सभी को मेरा नमस्कार।
मधुबाला जी नमस्कार।
सर सर, ये जो अभी आपने कहा कि ये अचानक नहीं आया है, इसमें ये जो पर्यावरण प्रभाव आकलन अधिसूचना है, तो आखिर कोविड-19 जैसी वैश्विक महामारी जब चल रही है, जब पूरा देश परेशान है, उस वैसे में इसको जारी करने की हड़बड़ी क्यों है? क्या इसकी आड़ में अपनी चहेती कंपनियों एवं व्यापारिक मित्रों को फायदा पहुंचाने की कोशिश है क्या?
नहीं, इससे बिल्कुल पूंजीपतियों को तो जरूर फायदा पड़ेगा, पर सरकार ये भी कह रहा है कि लघु उद्योग से भी इसका फायदा लघु उद्योग को भी पड़ेगा। तो जैसा मैंने कहा, आनंद को कहा कि ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस, अगर आप ये मानकर चलते हैं कि पर्यावरण संबंधित कानून जो है एक बाधा है, ये एक स्पीड ब्रेकर है, और ये जो आर्थिक तरक्की में तेजी लाना चाहिए उसमें रुकावट ये लाते हैं, तो मैं समझता हूँ ये अधिकानून उस रास्ते में एक कदम है। पर ये वक्त नहीं है इस अधिसूचना का, ये वक्त गंभीर वक्त, जैसा कि आपने कहा, महामारी का वक्त है, और ऐसे वक्त में ये अधिसूचना लाना मैं समझता हूँ ये चिंताजनक है। न केवल यही नहीं, पर कई ऐसे प्रावधान हैं, पब्लिक की भूमिका जो है, कानून की भूमिका जो है, सरकारी संस्थाओं की भूमिका जो है, नेशनल ग्रीन ट्राइब्यूनल का जिक्र मैंने किया, इन ऐसे संस्थाओं की भूमिका जो है, इनमें जो कमियां आ रही हैं, इसको को कमजोर किया जा रहा है। ये सब एक संकेत देता है कि सरकार को पर्यावरण संरक्षण प्राथमिकता नहीं है। अगर प्राथमिकता होती तो ये अधिसूचना नहीं जारी होता।
सर, इसी से संबंधित सर, जबकि अभी अगर हम देखें तो जलवायु में लगातार हो रहे खतरनाक बदलावों और प्राकृतिक आपदा की आवृत्तियों के लगातार बढ़ते जाने के बीच पर्यावरण के लिए खतरा बनने वाले इस कानून की क्या उपयोगिता है, और इसे फिर से वही है कि कौन से हितसत्व, जबकि हम आईपीसीसी 18 की बात करें, उसके रिपोर्ट के अनुसार तो सिर्फ एक दशक हमारे पास है, 2021 से 30 तक हम अपने पर्यावरण को बचा सकते हैं, तो बचाएं। ऐसे में और बिहार की सर बात करें तो जलवायु परिवर्तन की वजह से इस बार जो लाइटनिंग के केसेस हुए हैं, और अभी तक सर 400 लोगों की मृत्यु हो गई है, जाने जा चुकी है। तो अपने आप में जब लोग रहेंगे नहीं, तो फिर ऐसे जो विकास और पर्यावरण के संतुलन की बात आप कर रहे हैं, ये कहाँ तक वाजिब है?
ये मधुबाला जी, 10 साल पहले जब मैं मंत्री था और जलवायु परिवर्तन की बात मैं कर रहा था, तो लोग कहते थे कि मैं क्या बात कर रहे हैं, जलवायु परिवर्तन ये सब ठीक है, पर ये विकसित देशों के लिए माने रखता है, हमारे देश के लिए नहीं माने रखता। पर आज हकीकत क्या है, सब लोग जान चुके हैं, महसूस कर रहे हैं। जलवायु परिवर्तन कोई किताबी फिनोमेना नहीं है। आज रोज हम देखते हैं, हमारे रोज के जीवन की हकीकत ये हम भुगत रहे हैं जलवायु परिवर्तन का नतीजा। जब मैंने कहा पहले ही, वायु प्रदूषण, जल दूषण, रासायनिक संदूषण, जलवायु परिवर्तन, कई जगह बाढ़ जो आए हैं, दक्षिण भारत में जो बाढ़ आए हैं, आपके राज्य बिहार में जो बाढ़ आए हैं, ये सब क्या दर्शाते हैं? यही तो दर्शाते हैं कि पर्यावरण जो संतुलन है वो बिगड़ गया है। अगर आप जानबूझकर पर्यावरण में संतुलन बिगड़ने का काम करेंगे विकास के नाम पर, तो नतीजा यही होगा। तो ये वक्त है हमें संभाल के, सावधानी के साथ आगे चलना चाहिए। ये कोविड महामारी, हम ये समझते हैं कि ये स्वास्थ्य की, ये जरूर सार्वजनिक स्वास्थ्य का मामला है, पर इसका एक और चेहरा है पर्यावरण में जो संतुलन बिगड़ा है।
सर, प्राकृतिक आपदाओं की बात के साथ साथ जैसा कि मैंने बताया अभी मानव जनित आपदा को भी क्या ये बढ़ावा नहीं दे रहा है? जैसा कि अभी हाल में सर 7 मई 20 को विशाखापत्तनम के जो एलजी पॉलीमर प्लांट में गैस रिसाव की वजह से करीब 14 लोगों की जानें गई और करीब 400 लोगों को अस्पताल में भर्ती कराया गया और 2000 लोगों को जो कि 1.5 से 3 किलोमीटर के दायरे में रह रहे थे उनको वहां से हटाया गया। तो ऐसे में ये जो पोस्ट फैक्टो क्लियरेंस की बात आपने कही थी, तो ऐसे में क्या ये मानव जनित आपदाओं के साथ साथ प्राकृतिक आपदाओं के साथ साथ मानव जनित आपदाओं को भी बढ़ावा नहीं दे रहे हैं?
एक बात सही कहा, जो प्राकृतिक आपदा है आजकल पिछले दशक में देखें, प्राकृतिक आपदा अक्सर आते रहते हैं। उत्तराखंड हो, केरल हो, असम हो या बिहार हो, सारे राज्य में प्राकृतिक आपदा जो है अक्सर आया करते हैं। तो ये जलवायु परिवर्तन का यही नतीजा है। तो ये सब बातें जानते हैं, जानने के बावजूद हम ऐसे कदम लेते हैं जो पर्यावरण में संतुलन है उसको हम बिगाड़ देते हैं। विकास के नाम पर हाईवे हो, रेलवे के प्रोजेक्ट हो, विद्युत परियोजनाएं हो, कोई जो विकास के नाम पर हम ये परियोजनाएं शुरू करते हैं, हम ये देखते नहीं हैं कि पर्यावरण पर इसका क्या असर होगा। ये अधिसूचना जो है मधुबाला जी, इसका एक और प्रावधान जो है, राज्यों का अधिकार छीना जा रहा है। और एक बात हम विकेंद्रीयकरण की बात करते हैं और दूसरी बात, असलियत तो ये है विकेंद्रीयकरण नहीं, असलियत ये है केंद्रीयकरण। और ये अधिसूचना का एक बहुत जहरीला प्रावधान यह है कि जो राज्य के स्तर पर एनवायरनमेंट इम्पैक्ट असेसमेंट अथॉरिटी बनाए जाते हैं, जो अधिकार है वो राज्यों से छीना जा रहा है और कहा जा रहा है कि केंद्र सरकार को अधिकार दिया गया है कि हम राज्य में इम्पैक्ट असेसमेंट अथॉरिटी का गठन करेंगे। तो ये विकेंद्रीयकरण नहीं है, ये केंद्रीयकरण है। और मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि बिहार के राज्य में मुख्यमंत्री, महाराष्ट्र के सभी मुख्यमंत्री इस आवाज उठाए कि हम चाहते हैं विकेंद्रीयकरण, पर ये अधिसूचना कर रहा है केंद्रीयकरण।
सर, एक आखिरी सर प्रश्न मेरा कि ये जो है आदिवासी जो कि जल, जंगल और जमीन तथा माटी और मानुष के सामाजिक पर्यावरणीय सहयोग और सामंजस्य को क्यों खत्म करना चाहता है, और ऐसा करके ये जो अधिसूचना है या जो बाद में फिर कानून के रूप में पारिस्थितिकीय संतुलन किसके फायदे के लिए ये बिगाड़ रहा है या बिगाड़ना चाहता है?
जब मैं मंत्री था 2009 में एक हमने नीति अपनाई कि जो वन अधिकार नियम है, वन अधिकार कानून है जो 2006 में बनाया गया था, उसके क्रियान्वयन के बिना किसी परियोजना को हम अनुमति नहीं देंगे। यानी कि जो वन अधिकार नियम के अनुसार आदिवासियों को जो हक मिलता है उसका पूरा नहीं होगा तो कोई परियोजना आदिवासी या ट्राइबल इलाकों में शुरू नहीं हो पाएगा। तो ये सारा वन अधिकार अधिनियम को भी कमजोर किया जा रहा है, फॉरेस्ट राइट्स एक्ट को कम किया जा रहा है। और अगर आप देखें झारखंड में, छत्तीसगढ़ में, उड़ीसा में, तेलंगाना में जो कानून बनाए गए हैं, खास तौर से ग्राम सभा को और अधिकार देने का कानून जो बनाया गया है, उसको खत्म किया जा रहा है। और खत्म क्यों किया जा रहा है? क्योंकि पूंजीपति बड़े प्रभावशाली हैं। पूंजीपति बड़े प्रभावशाली बन गए हैं और पूंजीपति आज तय करते हैं कि कौन सा पर्यावरण कानून रहेगा, कौन सा पर्यावरण कानून नहीं रहेगा। ये बड़ी अफसोस की बात है।
बहुत धन्यवाद सर। और मैं अब जी सौम्या वर्मा को हैंड ओवर करती हूँ।
Jairam ji, we are moving on to additional questions from various audience members. And the first question is actually from a 12-year-old student called Vibhav Peri. So it's very encouraging that youngsters are taking part. So Vibhav, will you come on board and ask your question to Jairamji, please?
Hello, sir. So, how do we teach people, unopinionated people, about the draft EIA? Because most people don't know anything about the EIA.
Well, one thing I must tell you, young man, that the hope for the country and the environment is the future generation, is your generation. I think you are more worried, you're more concerned, and your stake in a clean environment, clean air, clean water, the protection of forests and biodiversity, very, very important. The EIA notification has received a lot of media attention. There's been people supporting it, people who have opposed it. It was supposed to be translated into regional languages, but it was not translated into regional languages. The court has directed that it should be translated into, where are you speaking from?
I'm speaking from Delhi.
You're from Delhi. Well, for example, the notification is not available in Assamese. It's not available in Malayalam. It's not available in Punjabi. But the court has directed the ministry to publish it in local languages so that more and more people can get involved. I think over a period of time, you will see a lot of people have got engaged with this, but the government has been shaken. In fact, the government wanted to close down a website because they kept sending mass emails. Now, when I was also minister, I also used to get a lot of emails. One day I got some 800 emails, but I knew who was behind this. It was actually Greenpeace, who was doing all this. So I called up Greenpeace and I said, why the hell are you making my life miserable? One email is enough. So they laughed, I laughed, but I didn't do anything about it. But look at what this government has done. They've actually closed down a website because they were worried about, spam. I think, this is a very disturbing feature, that people see public protests. They don't see it as part of a democratic society.
According to me, one of the worst parts of the EIA is that they've put percentages for clearance. So
Yes.
clearance is less than 25% of the entire hotspot, then you don't need clearance. So it's like saying, if I have a grove of 10 trees and a forest of 1,00,000 trees, I can remove 20,000 trees from the forest and 2 trees from the grove and say they are the same.
You see, what they want to do is they want to make all clearances online. This is what they want to move. This is when the standing committee talked to the ministry yesterday. What turned out was ultimate objective is to make everything online. Now, when you want to go everything online, you must have some metric, no? 20%, 30%, 40%. So this is part of that. This is part of that mindset. But most importantly, I think what is very clear, as I said at the beginning, they're looking at it from the point of view of ease of doing business. Does this help industry? Does this help? They say small and medium business, but actually the people who are going to benefit by it are the big builders, are the big coal miners, are the people who put up big industrial projects. Those are the biggest beneficiaries of this notification.
They said that they'll stop all illegal already started projects, but it can't happen. Even if you stop a project which has been done, it just ruins the area. It's ruined. Now you can't fix it unless it's left for around 30, 40 years.
What does the notification, as I said, opens the door for somebody starting a project and getting an environmental approval later. Now, this is a very strange way of decision making. Basically, what you're saying is, okay, come, you can do whatever you want. Later on, we'll regularize it. This business of regularizing violations is in my view, is detrimental. It goes against the very spirit of the laws. You need environmental laws to protect the environment. The idea that you can protect the environment without environmental laws and environmental regulations and environmental standards is, in my view, a very dangerous idea. But it's an idea that many people in this government believe in.
Thank you, Vibhav and Jairamji. Just before we go on to the next speaker, once more, since some of the audience is asking what should we do, how should we take this forward, once more we're sharing the details on how you can register your objections. You can send an email or you can write to the Secretary of the Ministry, and these are the details for how you can go ahead and do that. So please go ahead and let's move on.
But before the 11th of August, Rajiv,
yes,
please.
yes, right away, over the weekend. Over the weekend. I would now like to, I'd like to invite our next speaker, which is, who is Nithyanand Jayaraman from Chennai, who has a question for you. And I would request each of our questioners to stick to just one question because we still have many, many more people to cover. Thank you so much. Over to you, Nithyanand.
Thank you very much, Jairam sir and Mr. Rajiv sir. Yeah, I have a bunch of things to say, but I want to restrict my intervention to the issue of science and public participation. The scientific assessment, expert appraisal, and public participation, I feel, would be the three pillars of environmental decision making that EIA tried to bring in. And within this, if I look at it, the scientific assessment is already very poor. There's fudge data, there's plagiarized content, there's not a single EIA report, and you have said it so yourself, that most of the EIA reports are plagiarized, it's ritualistic. And the expert appraisal is also problematic because the experts might have the expertise, but they don't have the spine to speak the truth, or there is not enough context to provide them with independence for them to offer their honest opinion. And public participation is limited to a very controlled and intimidating public hearing, if at all. So my question is primarily that at present, the fate of communities and ecosystems are in the hands of EIA consultants, experts, officials in the ministry, engineers in the Pollution Control Board, and Forest Department staff, none of whom are accountable. In the sense, if I were a citizen and these guys were to make a mistake, I cannot hold them accountable. Have you grappled with this problem while you were in the ministry? What are the citizens' tools to hold these authorities accountable? What can we as citizens do to help independent-minded ministers, independent-minded experts and staff inside these organizations feel more comfortable to speak the truth?
Well, I agree with you. There's a lot left to be desired on the environmental impact assessment reports. In fact, my own experience was that a lot of them were cut and paste. And some of the worst culprits were government organizations, not private bodies. Government consultants, government institutions. I won't name the institution, but one in particular institution, very famous institution, which is called upon to do impact assessment, routinely used to do a cut and paste job. But they were found out, very quickly. They were found out by civil society organizations. They were found out by local communities. And I think this is where the role of public, the role of local community comes in very, very relevant and very useful. Because if they raise their voice, there is no impact assessment more powerful than the voice of the local communities, affected communities. And I can tell you, Nithyanand, that governments cannot afford to ignore them for too long. In my experience has been that, when local communities have really mobilized and organized themselves, governments have had to bow down, whether it's the state government or the central government. So while there is an official impact assessment, I think bringing out unofficial impact assessments and putting it into the public domain challenges the credibility of the official impact assessment, which governments cannot ignore. And that is something that I think we should encourage. I would certainly encourage that.
We now go on to another guest. This is Kapil Raj Agarwal, and I think he's going to ask you a question in Hindi. Okay, Kapil Raj ji.
Hello, sir. Sir, my name is Kapil Deep Agarwal, and thank you for inviting us. Thank you for taking up this issue. Sir, मैं सर कानपुर से आता हूँ, और आप जानते हैं कि कानपुर से जब गंगा नदी बहती है तो शायद अपने सबसे ज्यादा पोल्यूटेड एक इंडस्ट्रियल शहर होने की वजह से एयर पोल्यूशन का भी यहाँ पे बहुत ज्यादा इशू रहता है। भले ही हेडलाइंस नहीं आती है दिल्ली जैसी कि यहाँ पे पोल्यूशन है, पर ये बराबर बहुत ही बुरे पोल्यूशन के स्टेट में रहता है, एयर पोल्यूशन में। तो हमने ये देखा है कि जो पिछले EIA, जो अभी भी करंट हमारे EIA रेगुलेशंस हैं, ये बहुत ज्यादा इफेक्टिव नहीं रहे हैं पोल्यूशन को या इन्वायरमेंटल इश्यूज को, हमारे इन्वायरमेंटल क्राइसिस को हैंडल करने में। तो इसको देखते हुए मुझे लगता है कि केवल क्या ये ड्राफ्ट एडुकेट नहीं है, या ये ड्राफ्ट तो बल्कि और ज्यादा डाइल्यूट करता है हमारे ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्टिंग प्रोविजंस को। तो क्या केवल ये कहना कि हमें ये ड्राफ्ट नहीं चाहिए ये काफी होगा, या हमें एक स्ट्रेंथेंड EIA की तरफ बढ़ना चाहिए? और आपके एक्सपीरियंस से मैं जानना चाहूंगा सर कि अगर हम कोई बेहतर EIA प्रोसीजर की तरफ बढ़े तो क्या उसके प्रिंसिपल्स होने चाहिए, क्या हमारे गाइडिंग प्रिंसिपल्स होने चाहिए?
आपने सही बात कहा। मेरे अनुभव में हमारे जो कानून हैं बड़े प्रगतिशील कानून हैं, बड़े सख्त कानून हैं, पर इस कानून को कोई लागू नहीं करता है। आपने कानपुर का जिक्र किया, चमड़े का उद्योग है, पानी प्रदूषण देखिए, रासायनिक संदूषण देखिए, चमड़े के उद्योग की भूमिका बहुत भारी रही है। और जब मैं कानपुर गया तो मैंने सवाल उठाया कि कानून है, हमने कानून को क्यों नहीं लागू किया है? कानून कहता है कि अगर बार बार आप जो ये पोल्यूशन को नियंत्रण में लाने के लिए आपने कोई कदम नहीं उठाए हैं, आपके खिलाफ कार्रवाई हो सकती है, आपको बंद किया जा सकता है। और कन्नौज से लेकर कानपुर तक तो 700 किलोमीटर गंगा का स्ट्रेच है। इसमें कई उद्योगों को हमने पर्यावरण कानून के तहत बंद करने का अपने आदेश दिया। तो कानून है, कानून में प्रावधान है, हमारे पास संस्थाएं हैं, पर एक क्षमता होनी चाहिए, एक मनसा होनी चाहिए। और जो मंत्री है या मंत्रालय में जो है, जो अफसर हैं, उनको ये महसूस होना चाहिए कि हम कानून को लागू करेंगे। सिर्फ कानून कागज में नहीं होने की क्या जरूरत, क्या फायदा? तो ये बात नोटिफिकेशन, ये जो नोटिफिकेशन आया है, अभी भी मसौदा है, जो आज के कानून है उसको और भी कमजोर करते हैं। जो प्रगतिशील कानून है उसको एनफोर्समेंट करने की जरूरत है, उसको लागू करने के लिए हमें और क्या संस्थाएं चाहिए, संस्थाएं को और मजबूत बनाने के लिए हमें क्या कदम उठाने चाहिए, उस पर हमें बहस करना चाहिए। बल्कि हम ये नोटिफिकेशन पर बहस कर रहे हैं, जो नोटिफिकेशन कानून को कमजोर करता है उस पर हम बहस कर रहे हैं। तो सही सवाल उठाया आपने कि अंतिम जो टेस्ट है, कानून को आप लागू कर रहे हैं कि नहीं, कानून का एनफोर्समेंट हो रहा है कि नहीं। ये नोटिफिकेशन चलता रहेगा, पर जो कानून है उसको आप लागू कर रहे हैं कि नहीं, और नहीं कर रहे हैं क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं?
सर एक मेरा प्रश्न आपसे और है सर, अगर मैं एक प्रश्न और पूछ सकता हूँ सर से। हेलो,
गो अहेड।
सर ये कभी भी राजनीतिक मुद्दा नहीं बन पाता है। हमारा जितना भी पर्यावरण से जुड़ा बात है, लोगों के अंदर भी इसको जुड़ी चेतना नहीं है, और हम कभी भी इसको एक राजनीतिक मुद्दा नहीं बना पाते। इसका बहुत नुकसान है सर पूरे ही इशू को। तो आपको क्या लगता है इसके क्या प्रॉब्लम्स हैं जिसकी वजह से ये आज तक लोगों की चेतना में नहीं आ पाया, राजनीतिक मुद्दा नहीं बन पाया?
देखिए, आज जो हमारे सामने हकीकत आ निकला है कि पर्यावरण से स्वास्थ्य पर बहुत गहरा असर होता है। प्रदूषण हो या संदूषण हो, हमारे स्वास्थ्य पर बड़ा आजकल सबकी चिंता क्या है? आपकी चिंता क्या है? मेरी चिंता क्या है? स्वास्थ्य की चिंता है। और आज जो पर्यावरण और स्वास्थ्य के बीच में जो ताल्लुकात है, पर्यावरण नीतियों से स्वास्थ्य पर क्या असर होता है, वो आज बहुत सामने आया है। 10 साल पहले हम इसकी चिंता नहीं करते थे। 10 साल पहले अगर आप देखें अखबारों में, दिल्ली में प्रदूषण की चिंता नहीं हुआ करती थी। आज सभी जगह सिर्फ प्रदूषण की चिंता है। क्यों? क्योंकि हमारे स्वास्थ्य पर इसका नकारात्मक असर हो रहा है। तो अगर हम पर्यावरण के मुद्दों को स्वास्थ्य के नजरिए से देखें तो मैं समझता हूं एक राजनीतिक सहमति, आम सहमति हम बना पाएंगे।
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kapil. And now we turn to an activist and a writer from Mumbai, Radhika Jhaveri. Radhika, will you please join us?
Hi, thank you for having me here. It is nice to see you, Jairam Rameshji, taking such an open stance against the draft EIA 2020. So my question to you is that there seems to be an agreement amongst a lot of policy researchers and leading environmentalists that all the previous versions of the draft as well, the 2006 version and the 1994 version also, they've never been properly and completely implemented in letter and in spirit. And that EIA has become more of a tool that is used to give an appearance of legitimacy to what is essentially a practice of handing over the country's resources to a few, corporate interests. So it seems that apart from the withdrawal of the 2020 draft, the bigger demand pertains to a restructuring of the entire framework of India's environmental laws, including the EIA. So this demand is for the government, to sort of go back to the drawing board and rework on the whole thing, bring about a complete overhaul of environmental governance in this country. So my question is, what would your opinion be about this? And would a party like the Indian National Congress put its weight behind such an overhaul?
Well, I am against an overhaul, because the moment you say we want an overhaul, then this government will completely throw out whatever laws we have. Our problem, Radhika, whether it's the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, whether it's the Forest Conservation Act of Water Pollution Control Act of 74, the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, the Environment Protection Act of 86, the Forest Conservation Act of 2006. These are very progressive laws, but you have to enforce these laws. The moment you say, no, let's redo the laws, then I think you're opening up a Pandora's box. And there will be a lot of people who will use this opportunity for saying, maximum environment, minimum laws. So, I don't want to go that route. My point is, I agree with you. Previous notifications have not been enforced strictly, whether it is 94 or 2006. Now this 2010 notification further weakens an already weak enforcement machine.
Exactly.
So your demand should be not to rewrite the laws. Your demand should be to strengthen the machinery for enforcement. How do you make the enforcement stricter? How do you bring urban local bodies into this game? How do you strengthen the capacity of the state governments? How do you strengthen the capacity of the Central Pollution Control Board? So please do not, in your enthusiasm, start advocating, let's burn down all environmental laws and let's create a legal structure. That, in my is a recipe is a remedy worse than the disease. Your focus, how do you strengthen the enforcement, and how do you ensure that this notification does not weaken an already weak enforcement system?
Can I ask something else? Do we have the time?
Yeah, go ahead. Quickly, go ahead.
So I think the problem that the way we see it is that unless and until our political parties are, we manage to clutch them away from the control of corporates, it seems very difficult for arguing that that the governments sort of allow for or oversee a proper enforcement. I mean, is it not what the problem is essentially? I mean, is it not where we are getting stuck, that we are having very strong, very powerful corporate lobbies who've entered our government democratic space?
Well, the corporates are certainly very influential, no doubt about it. They're better organized, and they have sort of, the media is also very much with the corporate world these days. So that's a reality that we have to contend with. But I think ultimately, democratic processes, people's protests, the mobilization of local communities, the mobilization of local bodies, panchayats, nagarpalikas, these play a very important role. And I think it's not easy. I'm not minimizing the challenges that we have, particularly if people in government are not willing to listen, if they don't believe in public participation, if they see civil society as a threat and not as people who can improve the quality of decision making. But I think we just have to be at it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Radhika. We'll now turn to more audience questions, but in the interest of time and the idea of sort of covering as many questions as possible, maybe over the next 20 minutes, we'll just ask our own team members to read out questions that have come in from the audience, either earlier or during the course of this discussion.
Are you going to have a rapid fire round also?
Not exactly, but you will have rapid questions nonetheless. Shonali, will you just jump in now?
Sure. Our first question is from Shri Konkan Saikia, who asks, what are the legal avenues available, such as filing a PIL? We know that one has already been filed, but would it make sense for additional petitions to be filed as well?
Absolutely. I think the legal route is open. This notification actually is in contradiction of the Parent Act. Remember, this notification is subordinate legislation, and you cannot have a subordinate legislation which violates the mother legislation. So the legal grounds for challenging the notification are very, very strong. Some people have already thought about it, written about it. This is a route that I would strongly encourage people to take, because it is in the public interest.
Soumya, next.
Yes, so our next question is coming from multiple people. This has already been mentioned earlier, but there seems to be a desire to know how exactly will this play out in terms of the Committee on Subordinate Legislation, and are there positive outcomes that are likely from this?
Well, I have no idea actually, Soumya. The 11th of August is the last date for public to send in their comments. The Standing Committee has started deliberating on this yesterday. The Minister has written to me saying that, he will take all suggestions into account. Meanwhile, some people have approached the courts as well. So I really don't know how this is going to. I personally have no clarity. But the important thing is to keep the battle alive, to keep the issue alive, to keep badgering the government with as many memoranda and as many comments on the notification as possible. And as somebody suggested in the previous question, because in fact, as I was speaking to you, I got a message from a very senior civil servant, a retired civil servant. And let me read out this message to you because it answers your question. He says, sir, when subordinate legislation goes beyond its remit, it can be challenged in the court. this should be considered in respect of the EIA notification 2020. But this is it's a very important suggestion that has come, and I think people.
Thank you, sir. Shonali, the next question.
Yes, our next question. Our next question is again from multiple people who have sent them in over email and during the live stream. This is from Sri Konkan Saikia, Mr. Johnny and Ms. Shailaja Deshpande. They'd like to know how the common public can be mobilized to oppose the EIA and what local communities can do on the ground.
Well, I was just this afternoon, I got an email from over 30 organizations in the Northeast, on the EIA notification. I mean, this was a collective voice. Different organizations have got together and expressed their reservations on the notification. So I think, when the power of the collective becomes apparent, then certainly governments cannot ignore that voice. They can ignore individuals, but they cannot ignore the voice of a consolidated collective. So we should I think people should keep raising their voice, this is not the time for, I can't advocate public protests at this point of time. That might have other public health consequences. But certainly, to make the government aware, not only the central government, but also to get the state governments, in this process, to sensitize the state governments to fight. Because the one thing that the central government yesterday said in the standing committee is that we have consulted all the states and the states are on board. Now, I failed to see how the states will be on board on a provision in the notification which is actually snatching away the powers of the states to appoint impact assessment authorities.
Next,
Yes,
Soumya.
so our next question comes from Mr. Anupam Saraf, who actually talks about how during your tenure as Minister for Environment, you launched an atlas of wetlands. And it was one of the most sort of foremost databases. Should the ministry now create a database that so that the EIA can be objectively assessed, viewed by the public? And I think this speaks to the larger question of like other policy interventions that maybe need to be taken in addition to the other concerns that are being raised right now.
I think the environmental impact assessments should be routinely made public. But unfortunately, what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years is that the minutes of the meetings which are held, the expert appraisal committee meetings, even those are not being uploaded, onto the website. So on the one hand, the government is saying online, but actually when you see the transparency indicators, most of the information that used to be in the public domain, I remember when I was minister, every decision I took was a speaking order. It was all in the public domain. People could find out immediately why I took a particular decision, what were the factors. Some people supported me and many people attacked me on those decisions, but that's the nature of decision making. You have to be accountable and you have to be transparent, but unfortunately, neither transparency nor accountability seems to be the priority as far as environment is concerned.
Next question, please.
Our next question is from Ms. Arpita Singh, who wants her question is, what do you think about the Ken-Betwa River linking, submerging the Panna Tiger Reserve? What should have been the EIA's role in this project?
Well, as I said, for almost 2-3 years, I was able to stall the Ken-Betwa link. Then it got revived. Then it got stalled again. And now it's got revived again. Seems to be that it's going to go through. Seems to be that it will be the first of the river linking projects that will see the light of day. And the prime core of the forest area in the Panna Tiger Reserve, the forest area is going to be completely submerged. I mean, I've written about it, I've spoken about it, I've raised it in Parliament. And when I had the powers to stop it, I had actually stopped it in 2009. But unfortunately now, things have moved ahead. Now, one interesting thing about the Ken Betwa project was that the then Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who is now back as Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, was not a great supporter of this project. It was actually being pushed by Mr. Gadkari and Uma Bharti, who was then the Minister for Water Resources, who represented that area. But I hope that with Mr. Shivraj Singh Chauhan now back as Chief Minister, he will once again go slow on this project, because this project was opposed by the Madhya Pradesh State Wildlife Protection Board as well.